Democrat Party. She's on the National Democrat Committee and also with the Foundation for Mideast Communications, which I think is a very important organization here in Orlando, or has the potential to be. She loves to travel, been some really exciting places like the Andes and Taiwan, and even has a tremendous amount of information to give you, so I will give you Carol Seminole.
Thanks. Carol Seminole, okay? I took a while trying to figure out what I would tell you all today because I wasn't quite sure what you were looking for. And so what I did was like I do when I want to cook something. I read all the different recipes, and I write down the major ingredients, and then I kind of go for it, what seems right as I'm making it. So I'm going to kind of take some lead from you, and if you have a question or a comment, I want you to go ahead and ask or say or take a note on it and do that later. I kind of would like to say in the beginning, travel is something that I think is extraordinarily important to your education, whether it be taking time off from formal education, which may be heresy to some educators, or just traveling for pleasure. But when you travel, don't just go to the Hiltons. Go out and meet people, talk to them, find out what they feel and what they think, and also find out what's happening in the world. Because, you know, when you read about it, it's real easy to become impersonal. All those bad things happening everywhere. And, you know, we can't, what can we do about it? We can't do anything about it. I mean, you know, that's their problem. And golly, it's nice that we've got a McDonald's down the street and, you know, car and all of that. But when you get out there and you meet other people and you put faces and names to the news that you're reading, it really, I think, makes a difference. And I think it makes a difference how you'll relate to those problems and hopefully take part of the responsibility upon yourself to maybe make some small difference in this world. And I think knowledge, knowing them, and I also think that a lot of times when people are enemies, it's that they're enemies because they don't know each other. We fear what we don't know. And so getting out and getting to know other people and other cultures is extremely important. And that's what's always been a passion of mine. And so I have done things like hike in the Andes and get to meet people who, you know, would live totally different than we do. Whatever other culture, I've found there's a lot to respect about them. And I've also found we have a lot to be thankful for. What I'm going to do is just tell you briefly how my trip came about, and then just some little highlights of it, and then a little bit of the political insight, or mine, from my perception, that I found when I was there. First of all, the trip came about because I had been not as active as I would like to be, but active in a group here called the Foundation for Communication in the Mideast. And they have chapters throughout the country, and I have a couple of articles about them that I've got as handouts, and we'll hand them out before I leave. And these groups came together around the country. They're made up of people of Jewish background and Arabic background and Muslim, Christian, and those that are neither or just Christian and have no ethnic background that would relate to the area, but people that believe that communication is extremely important. And this small group, fairly small group that's here, there are I think 10 chapters in the United States, and more importantly 1 chapter in Jerusalem, where it's very difficult for people of all differences to meet. Those people got together and decided to take a trip over there. 4 people first went to Egypt. 4 of us went to Syria, which is kind of difficult. That's a very closed area. And then we met up with 4 more in Tel Aviv and then went to Jerusalem. So there were 12 of us all together. A good part of the trip was just being tourists and getting to know people and seeing a lot of the wonderful and exciting sights. And then the last 4 or 5 days we met with the Jerusalem Foundation. We met with a member of the Knesset, which is like their governing body. We met with a Palestinian journalist who was featured on Days of Rage, which was recently on PBS, and I'll mention that to you later. And we met with a professor, just lots of people. It was some of the just average people. We went to a Palestinian refugee camp. So that was the last days. I'm going to start you at the beginning. The beginning, I think, was kind of interesting because flying into Damascus was an experience. We had been told that we needed to be extremely careful, that there are very unfriendly relations between Syria and Israel. So we did not bring anything in our possession that would show that we were going on to Israel. In fact, my return trip tickets I had given to someone who was flying, those that were going to Egypt or Israel first, to carry with them, and we had fake tickets written for us showing us leaving out of Amman, Jordan, so that if we were, because we were told that we could be searched. Well, it didn't happen. It didn't happen, but we figured better safe than sorry. So we did have those tickets on. It turns out on the way back we really got questioned about having 2 tickets, but best laid plans. But it was, going into the country was an extraordinary experience for people that have been so used to freedom. Even in the travels that I've had, I never had had an experience where the people with me were really afraid. And they were afraid that we would get stopped or detained for any little thing. Going into the country, when you got to the airport, it was really desolate. It's not a thriving community, not a thriving area as far as green and pretty. We got in, and it was late in the evening, and there's soldiers all over, and first thing you have to do is you have to change $100 in order to get in. It's kind of like a tourist tax, I guess, because they give you about 12 lira to the dollar. I want you to remember that, 12 lira to the dollar at the airport. Okay, it took us about an hour to get through. People were really quite nervous. We were on the plane with people that were going into Lebanon because the Lebanese airport, Beirut airport, is closed, and those people had to go in by land. I asked about going into Beirut or going into Lebanon at all, and they told me it would not be safe. Hassled some, just, they just thought they were being cute, and, would ask to see about 12 things. And anyway, we got through, and about an hour later, but the and the people were just wonderful. 2 of the people I was with had relatives or distant relatives that were Syrian, and they had come to the airport to meet us, and they were just delightful. One of them's cousin was a Syrian soldier, and I said to him openly in the airport, listen, I really would like to try to get into Lebanon, and he went, shh. It was the feeling of oppression or suppression is just pervasive. I never saw anything directly that would make me be fearful, or never heard a specific incident. But if you ever went to talk about their president, or if they wanted to say something negative about him, it was always in a whisper, or be sure the door is closed. So that fear was everywhere. And it really made me realize just how incredible, we have it. These people they live in fear. They are quite critical of him, by the way. All of the people that I spoke to, except one, was quite critical of President Assad, but would never say anything out loud, nor ever want to be quoted. They were scared to death of it. All of the people that I spoke to were not supportive of Syria tearing up Lebanon. So when you talk about a people, always remember to differentiate between the people and the government. I would like to think that we are a government that is driven by the people, but in lots of places it's not. And so when you go to say all so-and-so, to stereotype, are awful, they all go out and they all just, they're terrible, I'd be afraid of any one of them. Please remember, that's not the way often the people feel. You're drafted in the Army and you go or you die, and you don't have a lot of choice. And if you are ever able to get into that country and really talk to people where they're not afraid to tell you, oftentimes they are not supportive of what's happening. It's not exactly an open democratic election that happens in many countries. So that was an experience. I must tell you that every person that I met in Damascus, and then we went on into another little town, was as warm and friendly. This is taxi cab drivers, common people, people that were neighbors, people on the street that were selling, were as kind and nice and helpful as they possibly could be. They were just really dear, warm people. They really were. And I hurt for them because this is not what they wanted. One of the women that I spoke to, she said something about wanting to come to America someday to live, and she said, I would never leave here except for one thing, the one thing we're missing the most, and that's freedom. She said it's just awful to not have freedom. Damascus is a huge city, as you know, possibly, if not the oldest city in the world, and lots of people. No litter laws, let me tell you. I mean, you come back and kiss every no litter sign that you see after seeing the debris that is incredible in the streets. But the people were very clean in their homes. They really were. There's some sort of a law, I don't know if it's written or not, against cars being any newer than, I don't know whether it's 5 or 10 years old. They're all old. All the cars are old. It must be a huge import tax or something on anything that's newer. And I guess that's just to keep things from getting imported into the country. Country appears very poor. Most of its money is going to military. When we went to buy in the market, everyone would say to us, when I would transfer it into dollars, I'd say, oh, that's costing me $40. And they'd say, no, it's not. It's 20, American. And I'd say, no, it's not. It's 20 lira. In the bank, it was 20 lira to $1. It was 12 at the airport, 20 in the bank. And they said, no, you don't do that. I said, what do you mean? They said, go to somebody else. Well, there's black market money. The black market exchange for the American dollar is 40. 35 to 40. Well, I must tell you all, I mean, if I go 38 in a 35-mile-an-hour zone, I know that a helicopter is going to come out of the sky and get me. So I am, I mean, if there's no one within 100 miles, I know I'll get got. So I was nervous. After about the second day, someone convinced us that we were crazy to be spending twice as much on things, and that they knew somebody that could, definitely, and this would be fine. Well, we went through the most harrowing couple of hours waiting for this guy to come back. Scared to death, swore that once I got that money in my hand, if I did, that I would never, ever, ever do such a thing again. And just was, I got out of there. In fact, I did not have 1 lira left. I just wouldn't spend any more money. So the night before I left, I charged my dinner on my American Express, figuring that that was the 20 lira to the dollar. I didn't care if I paid double for the meal. As we were checking out the next day, I found out that the hotel exchange, when you charge in a hotel, is again 12 to $1. So it was 4 times. So, it's just incredible that the amount of differentiation, we're just not used to that sort of thing. And I think getting a little taste of it is incredible. In order to, yeah.
Give an example of what would a lira buy? I mean, how many liras would it cost for, let's say, a can of Coke?
Okay. Oh, Coke is so expensive over there. I mean, that's not a good one. I mean, in Israel and in Syria, Coke's like a couple bucks a can.
Couple lira, $1.
Huh? Dollars. And lira? Well, it depends on who you exchanged your money with. So if it were $2, it might be, I have to calculate it, 80 lira. Or, no, that would be like, 40 lira maybe. This, okay, I bought this bracelet there, and they're great bargainers. Great bargainers, and I had seen it in the hotel gift shop and really liked it. And after this harrowing experience with the money, I thought, I'm not going to get 1 more cent of this. I don't care what happens. So he had given me a price the night before, and I went in that night before I went and charged my meal, had I known. And I said, this is all the lira I have, and I'm not coming out of here with any of it, and I'm not going to buy any more. Will you take it? So he took it. I don't remember exactly what it turned out to be, but and then went and charged the most expensive meal I shall ever have. Anyway, then we left to go to, and we had told no one that where we were going. If anyone asked, we said we were going to go to be tourists in Amman, Jordan. And we had, even the tour agency that we had there, we had a driver that was assigned to us that we had asked, can he speak English? And they said, yes. So when we first met Hassan the first night, he didn't speak a whole lot of English, but I thought maybe he was a little shy. By the second day, I was beginning to realize that there was quite a language barrier. But if you said to Hassan, can you speak English? He'd say, yes, yes, yes. And then you'd say to Hassan, Hassan, I'm going to chop your head off and throw you out the car. Oh, yes, thank you, thank you. I mean, he did not know English. You know, there's not a lot of tourists. You know, when we get to Israel, I mean, everyone speaks English, but in Damascus, because you can imagine what a damper this would put on your tourism, you know, with all the money exchange problems and so forth. The hotel was beautiful, the people were wonderful, but there's just not a lot of tourists. But anyway, and our car, by the way, these old cars broke down the first day on the way out to go to the village that we were going to. And we were on the side of the road for I don't know how long, and he finally said he'd hitch a ride back to town to get another car. And then finally we got a ride with just a passenger bus. But I was trying to take pictures as I was and scrambling up sides of rocks and so forth, and somebody said, one of the relatives that was with us, please don't take pictures here, because you could see, like, from here to those palm trees behind us, or the next building, there was a little barracks, and they're very nervous about anyone thinking that they would be doing anything that was wrong. But anyway, the next morning we said, please, we have to have a good car. We have to have a good car. This car cannot break down, because the bridge that's called the King Hussein Bridge on the Jordan side and the Allenby Bridge on the Israel side closes at noon, and you're not allowed through it after that. And so that would have meant another night. So we were to leave early. Well, our driver was late, and then there was a big hassle about the hotel bill, partly because some of the people I was with found out about the 12-lira exchange and how expensive things had been. And so we took off a little bit late, but I have never felt so much like I understood what it was like to be like on the Underground Railroad or something. Four normally very talkative people did not say a word. We were really nervous, and you could tell the tenseness of our driver. When I had spoken to the people at the travel agency to be sure that everything was under control, because we couldn't have a hitch, they did not want to know where we were going. It was like, we know we're getting you to Amman, Jordan, and that's all we want to know. And so this guy drove like a bat out to get us there. And I have to tell you that in Syria, I did not see one traffic light or one traffic sign. It is get where you're going as fast as you can, and you lay on your horn the entire time. You got up against the bumper and you go, I mean, it was an incredible experience to ride there. It was quite a thrill. Anyway, that's how we made it from there to Amman. And when we got to Amman, to the next travel agency that was going to take us, they were also nervous. You're late, you know, we're not going to make it, we're scared, just get in. And the guy that took us there said, don't say a word, let me do all the talking. Well, they had really built it up. It turns out that I don't think we needed to be as afraid as we were, but the residents, the citizens, have all of that, have a lot of fear. And whether it's real or imagined, I don't know, but I know that it's certainly there. So then we got to the bridge, and we were the last people that they let across. And the agents there were very nice to us. I think we were very obviously tourists, and Israel does want to encourage tourists trade, and they were very nice to us. There were checkpoints, by the way, along the way, where there would be whole, like, van or carloads full of people with every pot and pan on top of their truck, and you know, maybe 6 kids and 4 adults in this car, and they were made to take everything down, take every child out, unwrap all the stuff, pots, pans down, and go through it. First I thought maybe it was unnecessary harassment, but as I thought about it, you know, I guess it would be pretty smart if you wanted to try to sneak something through to fill your car up with every pot, pan, and child you could get your hand on, because why would anyone want to bother with all that? So that took us quite a while through those checkpoints for that. Anyway, we got in, and it was it was wonderful. I can't tell you what Israel, Tel Aviv, that's where we went the first night. How beautiful it is. You would not know war was going on. It's the physical and the spiritual beauty of Jerusalem is just beyond belief. I mean, I think it's one of the most wonderful places I've ever been. You felt extremely safe in the streets, extremely safe. You know, all the people here that were so scared, I can't believe you're going to the Middle East. How are you going to the Middle East? There was nothing to be afraid of. I mean, I was less afraid of street crime there than I have been in any major city that I've been in. But remember, this was in downtown Jerusalem or in downtown Tel Aviv. When you get out further into the West Bank or Gaza, or into the old city area after the strike time, which in those things I'll tell you about in a few minutes, you definitely then get more nervous. You really do. And for good reason, but we didn't really see any violence except one incident that I will tell you about. We then traveled, and I brought a map, and I'm sorry that I don't have had one. The one thing that I would like you to kind of think about is the fact that Israel's small. The whole Middle East is. You know, you can drive, we drove in 2 hours, 2 or 3 hours from Syria through Jordan into Israel. Well, it's maybe by the time stops and stuff, 3 hours, 3.5 hours. It's not far. I mean, it's closer than Miami, closer than Tallahassee. So there's a real delicate balance going on in the Middle East just from closeness, just because, you know, who you may be afraid of is right there. It's not like we've got an ocean between us and another country we might be nervous about. This is, you know, across the street, across the river. So, and later, if anybody wants to look at this, the purple are the places that we went, by the way. Came in over here, across the bridge, went the first night to Tel Aviv, and then we did traveling all around all of these places, and I'll tell you about some of them. The Dead Sea, to Jericho, Haifa, which is a beautiful place on the water where our 6th Fleet, I don't remember what the name of which fleet, but lots and lots and lots of our soldiers are there, our sailors. In fact, one night while we were out, one of them came, he lived in Sarasota, was thrilled to get to talk to some people from Florida. In fact, where did I just hear recently? The USO is closing some of their places all over the world, but Tel Aviv has stayed open. Great place for our guys to hang out, I guess. He had a pretty girl with him. He had found it. But the history is, and I'm going to give you all just a brief thing here that tells you from 8000 BC through 1967. It, of course, doesn't go up further because I didn't, the copy I got it from didn't have it. But to remember that, you know, you hear all the time about the wars having to do with religion. You know, that it's, say in Lebanon it's Muslims against Christians, or in Israel you'll hear Jews and Arabs, and you usually synonymously think Arabs and Muslims. They're not all Muslims. There are many Christians, not a great majority. The largest majority of Christians in the Middle East is in Lebanon. But there's, in Syria, maybe 17% Christians, and they're Greek Orthodox and Armenian, and just many of the Melkite and Maronite rites of the Catholic Church, Eastern Rite of the Catholic Church, so on. So, and all what you have to remember is that in that area, we're talking about the cradle of the 3 major religions in this world. It should be a place where there ought to be peace, you know. All of those major religions, their basic tenets talk about being good to your fellow man, being good to your neighbor. And, you know, you have to ask yourself, and I sure did a lot, why is it that we can't get them all just to come in and sit down and talk about this? Every one of them, if you ever study the different religions, or if many of you have, I don't know, but if you look at the Torah and the Quran and the Bible and take the major teachings, you know, like love your neighbor as yourself, you'll find it written just in different words in each of those major books. And so what is it? Well, I think that it's not just about religion. I know it's not just about religion. It's about economics. It's about fear. It's about land. And it certainly divides itself along religious lines, possibly as much for religious reasons as for ethnic reasons, because the preponderance of those people fall into those religions. You will find radicals, like I know you hear about the radical Muslims, Iran, and you know the book, what's his name that everybody?
Satanic.
Yes, Satanic Verses. There are radicals in every religion or in every faction. Those people are not all of the people, and there certainly are not. I mean, I would have to say that when I started being involved in this, if I had any prejudice, you know, I thought I didn't, but when I got involved in it, what I realized is maybe I had a prejudice against Muslims, because I had heard many negative stereotypes of radical things that happened, and you know, and I happen to have a heritage that's Lebanese and Christian, and so I'm sure that I had some things that were, you know, that I had heard, and they're people just like we are, and they're kind, peace-loving, the people that I've met, you know, of course, most of them here, and I met some over there. So they do not always speak, just like governments don't always speak for the people. Let's see, I want to tell you a few high points before we get into that, about, besides the history, and it goes way back, and I think that you all are going to have to do some studying on that to remember that Judaism, of course, was the beginning of Christianity. I mean, Christianity is founded on Judaism. And then beyond that, maybe 500 AD, I think it was, Mohammed began the Muslim religion. And that was founded on both of the religions. One of the places that we went that I thought was really interesting, we stayed several nights in different kibbutz. And one of them was called 1hr1min. And 1hr1min is a Christian kibbutz that was started mainly by the Dutch, but it has many people that stay there. And it was founded in order to make a statement to the Jewish people that we as Christians, according to the way that the woman that talked to us, who was absolutely incredible, that we as Christians have something to say about being sorry. Kind of like, okay, I wasn't there maybe when discrimination was happening, but it still happened, and I want to make a statement. So they were there as support. They raised roses, and they were just wonderful people. And they have, I thought was interesting, one of the young men that I sat across from at Shabbat dinner on the Friday night told me that he was from Holland, and that in his country, they did their service in many places. They don't just go into the army. They do their service in social ways. So this was something they could sign up for. And what he had done was bicycle, took like 5 months, and bicycled from Holland through all the Arab countries into Israel. And he said, I felt like if I was going to do this work for a year or two, whatever he was signed up for, I had to understand the people from the outside in, not just come here and be isolated. And he told me what an incredible journey he'd had. And one of the things he told me was going through Syria, that he'd never met such wonderful, warm, hospitable people. And he said that the people in the Middle East are also giving, but he said they would give and not let you give anything in return. And I thought that was such a nice, you know, warm statement about a people we hear such negative things about. This was people in their homes. This was not people with their guns on. Anyway, that was a a wonderful experience. We also stayed at 2 other kibbutzes, and they were great experiences. A kibbutz is shared living, and the original idea, the original kibbutz, and there aren't many of the original ones left, where the children were taken care of in the baby house all day long, and there was communal living. You know, the adults might live together and the children like in a nursery, and then the parents would come visit with their children some in the evening. And it was really a way of helping to get the land started. It was the most cost-efficient way of using labor and of raising your children and you know, families. As time has gone on, there's more separateness. It's almost like condominium living, except everybody works at the enterprise that the commune has. Every one of them, or most of them, have guest houses. You'd think you were staying in a motel. They were really nice. They had, you know, that was their way of, I guess, spreading the word. Also, that was another source of income. They had a pool, and it was really like being in an apartment complex. A moshev is like the kibbutz idea, except everyone has their individual living quarters. Like they might have their own homes or condominiums. And I don't think we visited them. Well, I guess you could call a moshev. One other place we visited but didn't spend the night that I meant to make you all a copy of this because I thought this was really interesting. It's called Neve Shalom. And I think one of the pictures that I'm going to show you all, a guy spoke to us. Yeah, here he is with his son. And I'll pass these around in a few minutes. It's an experiment in Arabs and Jews living together, and they have been for many years. And I think there was a special on PBS on it just recently. Or CNN. It was on CNN, you're right, because they sent me a card about it, but I wasn't home that night. And I think it's a wonderful idea. And the people there were really dedicated. Now, most of them work outside of the place. What their thing is that their school is their major thing because they want to educate the children together. They also put together units of study that are on like prejudice reduction and go out into the other villages and teach or get children together to go maybe put together a float for a parade and work on it together. The feeling being that if as children they get to know each other, they don't have time for the anger to build up. So anyway, that was another thing. A couple of things. This is, and I'll pass it around, this is Rosh Nikra, which is on the border of Israel and Lebanon. And you can see all the radar. And they had said, this is a guard, and there was all these, no pictures, no, you know, no passing. And I went up. I was dying to have a picture taken there, and I went up to him and asked him, went over to the gate and said, does anybody speak English? And he came over, he spoke perfect English. He had schooled in Detroit or somewhere, I don't know. And and he was delightful. Not only let me take his picture, asked me to. I mean, and then had 2 other guards. I didn't bring their picture because I was in it and it was a lousy picture. But 2 other guards sat with their guns, let me have their picture taken. They were just really nice. These were Israeli soldiers. The interesting thing that I want you to notice when I show you this is there were a lot of caves here. This was by the ocean. And through this, you can see this is walled up, and you can see these broken tracks. The Orient Express used to go straight through the East, Middle East, and it went from what is now Israel into Lebanon. And the tracks have been broken over like this gorge, and the wall has been walled up. I'll let you all just kind of look at that. Another thing, these are just some kind of indicative of the area. These are just some ruins. I think they were the Crusader city, and there's a little bit about the Crusader city, and this was a little tiny village that we saw. I just wanted you to see how quaint, and we're talking, you know, we get excited, I do anyway, in Orlando. I've grown up in Orlando. I live in a 50-year-old house. That's an old house. We saw places where there were mosaics that you could still see on the floor, you know, that had been excavated 2,000 years old. 2,000 years old. So it's just, you know, we just have absolutely no real perception of what of what old is until you get to the Middle East. There you go. That one's on both sides. Another thing that I wanted to point out was the wonderful feeling at the wall for the Jewish people. We went and saw a bar mitzvah and then a Shabbat service, which is Friday night service, and took part. And this is a friend of mine, Louise Franklin, who was there. You collect wishes from people here, and you stick them into the crevices of the hall. This is the holiest place, the Jewish people. And you can see some of us standing at the wall praying. My group, by the way, was, let's see, I think there were maybe, I don't know, 5 Jewish, 4 Christian Arabs of Arab background, and 2 Christians. So we were just, and all good friends. Interestingly, I don't know if any of you all read in the paper this past week that there are women in Israel that are picketing because, if you look at this closely, you're going to see a wall between them. The women must worship on one side and the men on the other, and never the twain shall meet. And when we were out, we all were standing in a circle saying a little prayer or something away from the wall. And one of the guards came up to us and said, no, women and men cannot touch here at the wall. So, you know, they were husband and wife, but you just don't. These are just things that you observe out of respect. And we were glad to do it. But I thought to myself, you know, see, you have to remember, Israel's a very young country, 1948. And so they have their own inner strife also, women protesting and saying, we want more, you know, we have a right to pray now, and so forth. And so they have their own, and that's another thing I'll try to briefly touch on because I'm going over. On the back, I have, these are 2 guys at the wall. This is one dressed in civilian clothes with his gun, and the soldier with his gun with a rose stuck in the end of it. I thought that was interesting. Okay, one of the things, this professor is 80-something years old, and he spoke to us for hours, and he was incredible. He's an Israeli professor of philosophy and science and everything. He's supposed to be an incredibly brilliant man. This man here was head of the Jerusalem Committee. He was co-head. There were 2 chairs of the Jerusalem Committee, a Muslim man of, I guess, Palestinian, and a Jewish man. And they were really close friends, but traveling together was very, you know, nerve-wracking because if you'd go into one area of the city or the other, but they just did it. They're really courageous men. And this is us at the Swedish Embassy, or this is a man there. The Swedish Embassy has a place that it would be like a friendship house, where they have a common ground where people can come and speak to each other and not have any fear. And they do wonderful work with that. And this is the Jerusalem group. And on the back is the guy from Neve Shalom and his little boy. And down here you're going to see, this is a man in a hotel in Bethlehem. And over the doorway of the hotel was May peace prevail on earth. And we went to that hotel. It really kind of makes me nervous to even have this picture. These people did not want pictures taken or tapes made. They were all Palestinians, all educated people. They were doctors, lawyers, engineers, many of which had spent time in jail, and they wanted to speak to us. But they were extremely nervous about it. But I thought it was interesting to kind of have to sneak into Bethlehem and go in, and then when it said, may peace prevail on earth, was... The last thing I want to tell you about is that we went into a Palestinian refugee camp. And I don't know, you know, in thinking about how to talk to you about this, I don't want this to at all be one-sided. I feel that there's a lot, one thing I came away from the Middle East figuring out is that there was a lot of confusion on both sides, a lot of hatred on both sides, and a lot of pain on both sides, and a lot of fear on both sides. But it was like when 2 kids get in a fight and you want to finally say, I know as a teacher, look, Nobody remembers who started it anymore. Let's sit down and in this room, close the door, and you're not coming out till we figure out a way to get along. And because depending upon who you listen to, the perception, you know, it's from where you sit. It's from where you sit. From here I see the front of his head, from there I see the back of his head. But one thing that I know is that refugee camp was a reality. So I'm going to tell you as objectively as I can what I saw. And I'm going to say I don't think two wrongs ever make a right. There have been some terrible wrongs, and I want Israel to be a secure and an independent state. But no human being could be excited about what happened there or what is happening or what has been happening for 40 years. The refugee camps have been there for 40 years. The biggest concern to me, a person who is very concerned about a secure and independent Israel, is you cannot raise children and have their children have children in these camps and not know that you are not raising a threat to your own society. Because the kind of anger that is spawned in that setting is a threat to anyone. It's really a threat. You know, you don't have, I mean, would you keep people right outside of Sanford in dire circumstances for 40 years and not expect them eventually to rise up against you? I might, even if I were not a humanitarian, go in and want to make things better because I'd know that they'd be a threat to me if I didn't. If people have decent housing and land to live on and food and a job, and they wanted jobs, then, you know, in a decent job where they can feel respect for themselves and see their kids have respect for them, you really are going to have a better chance at peace. We went in with the UN. UN bus took us in. And one of the reasons I put this guy on here, because this man was there outside the main office where we met. It's very, very meager. I had to use the bathroom, and it's a hole in the floor. And I would tell you, when I was in Jerusalem, I felt like it was one of the most modern cities in the world. This is not. This man, when I asked to take his picture, I thought it was so indicative because there's such a pride still. He just stood proud. And these are some children at a door. And then I'm going to show you more of the children. I'm big on kids. I took lots of pictures of kids just to show you that they're just regular kids, but also you can see some of the background. This is my friend talking to this lady at the door. These little guys, one of them's nose was, by the way, they were very proud. I tried to offer one a piece of gum, and they would say, no, it's okay. You know, a little brother would be next to her and say, no, you can't take that. And I'd say, it's okay. And it wasn't because he was afraid something was in it. They were just being really cute and sweet, and I'd taken their pictures. And I said, no, it's okay, honey, she can have it. So I gave it to her, and then he told her to say thank you. I have been in a lot of very impoverished countries and have had people beg, tug, pull. There was none of that. In a lot of places where I went where there were poor children, I didn't see any of that. But this, my friend Adele offered some Kleenex to the child, and then when she went to offer her whole pack, the woman said, no, I have some inside. I'm going to tell y'all, they don't have toilet paper. She did not have a box of Kleenex in that house, but she just, you know, was proud enough not to. You're going to see this child with his hands like this. That's a sign of intifada. We thought they were giving us victory sign, you know, and then we realized. And writing on the wall, and that's the way a lot of messages are given. But he had a smile on his face. He thought he was doing something, you know, kid-like. And then you'll see this house here that is demolished. The homes are abut each other, if you can call it. They're homes, there might be a 4-room home for 20 people. And if you are suspected of having done something wrong, they can come and say you're suspected of having done something wrong. You were involved in the Intifada, which is a revolution, kind of a supposedly a nonviolent revolution, and rocks are not nonviolent. I will tell you they're not nonviolent. These are not just little rocks a lot of times, and people have been killed with them. But it's what they're using. They're not using guns or whatever. So anyway, but since you're under military rule, you don't have the right, you don't have to go to court about that. And they can say, I give you 6 hours or 6 days to move. And, you know, it might be your fault. None of the rest of the family, but the family's going to be out of a house. So they seal your home and they blast it. When they blasted this one, they also got part of each house on either side. You could still see furniture and children's things because these people were only given hours. Since I've been home, I read that the Knesset passed a rule that you had the right to appeal your home being demolished. There have been something like 230 demolishings. The other thing, I wanted to see the school. The schools had been out for a year because the feeling of the government, and I know that there's a lot of rightfulness of fear because, you know, the Intifada was teaching the children to throw stones, if any of you will get to see Days of Rage, it shows you that there were leaflets. There was an article in Sunday's paper about the leaflet drops, telling them what to do. So the feeling of the government was that these children are learning to do this from being told to stir up trouble, and that when they get together in a school, you know, it's, you know, back in our early times of civil unrest, we said, okay, you know, whenever you put a curfew on a town, you'd say no more than 10 people can get together at a time and all that kind of stuff. Okay, well, that's what they say. No more than 10 people can get together at a time. 9 people, I think it is. So they closed the schools. They'd been closed for the better part of last year. Now, I'm a teacher and I'm a parent, and I'm here to tell you that if you close schools, you're going to end up with a bunch of thugs, because we're not talking about closing schools in an area where people had a swimming pool or the Y or a soccer field or a soccer ball. What are the kids going to do? I mean, I talked to one poor waiter, a Palestinian waiter. He said, my wife goes crazy trying to keep 4 kids in all day. I said, would you let them throw rocks? He met with us at midnight one night because he was afraid to talk to us in front of anybody. He said, I would never do that. I don't want my children to go to jail. Well, there are children that do, and there are people who feel like they're sacrificing their children for the cause. But, you know, the point is that when you keep kids out of school, you take away the basic education of a people. You set that whole civilization, that whole ethnic group back a year in education of their youth, and what are the kids going to do but get into trouble? So I was really excited because the schools had just been put back in. And our bus, so I asked, they said the boys are about to finish school, but the girls will be in school. So I asked to go up to see the school. And the whole camp was down like in a valley. Not a valley, but, you know, it was down, okay? Up on the hill, there were soldiers all around because you're always under military control. You're in occupied territory, and so they are always there to enforce curfew, and you have to carry an ID card, and if you do have a car, it has to have a special tag on it, so that anywhere or anything you go, you are being, you know, people know where you've gone. And so they had let back in the elementary schools, and if you look at these little boys, you'll see they're about 8, 9, maybe 7, 8, 9. As we were coming up the hill, the boys got all excited, and they were waving, you know, and we were taking their pictures, and they were doing this sign, you know, and all that. We got up to the school, and here's a picture of a classroom. This is half of it. There were about 40 children, 40 elementary students, maybe 50 in a classroom. They were adorable. I've been teaching long enough to know that this could not have been just totally staged. First of all, they didn't know we were going to go to the school because I just asked. We didn't even know school would still be in. We walked into the room, I teach my students to do this. All the kids stood, you know, And they sat down, and I mean, we got up there, they didn't know we were there, and you know, I was kind of looking around. It was incredible how well behaved they were. It really was. But after being there just a few minutes, I heard this boom. And I was rewatching Days of Rage last night in preparation for this. I did that and tapes and everything else I could get my hand on the last week or so. And that sound in it just really got me because it's exactly as I heard. And the principal said, please come quick, I want someone to see. And we ran over to the wall, and those little boys that you see here were being tear gassed because they didn't go home fast enough. Well, I got to tell y'all, I went crazy. I really did, from anger to crying to crazy. And the biggest insight for me on that was, wait a minute, I've only been here a little while. They're not my children or my grandchildren. And if they were, how angry would I be? I'm pretty easygoing, even-tempered, very much a pacifist. If I could get that upset about that, what kind of anger was brewing in this camp? What kind of anger when you see your babe, that happened to your babies? And then the other thing is true, too. One Israeli woman and I were talking, and I heard for her, I said, you know, I have sons the age of those soldiers, and doesn't it kill you that your 18 and 19-year-old boys, we're talking about a double tragedy, are out of fear, and it is fear. If you watch Days of Rage, you interview some of the soldiers afterwards, and you know, you die for them, they're scared too. I mean, these are 18-year-old kids with a big gun on their shoulder, and they get into an alley, and all these little kids are throwing rocks at them. They're going to react. So it's two tragedies. You know, it's people having to put their kids, the age of some of you guys, with big guns on and say, now use good judgment. Now use good judgment when a bunch of little kids are coming at you with rocks. You're scared, and you're going to do some things that later you're going to blow somebody away or something. And how do you live with that? How does that 18-year-old kid live with the fact that maybe he, you know, blew away a kid? And in fact, one of the articles that I will give you, a Father Warren Richardson, who's an Episcopalian priest, went over there, and he worked in this hospital for 3 weeks. And he gave his account of what he saw. And then he gave me just the other day an article regarding that hospital that he'd worked in, about a raid on it. But the article was not found in a United States paper, it was found in a London paper. So there are problems on both sides. The professor that we spoke to was so wise, he said, a lot of history's gone on. You know, we're talking about a difference between people that go back here 2,000 years or you go back here 1,500 years. Today is what we're talking about. And where do we go from today? Y'all, there are injustices all over the world. I was listening to the news this morning of something, I think it was in South Africa or wherever. But this one now has my heart and soul because I have names and faces on them. And I always have felt that way about any oppressed people. And I just would hate to think that people out of fear of being oppressed became the oppressor. And I would be just as down on anybody who came in and did that to someone else. It has nothing to do with my Arabic background, because I feel really strongly about there being a secure state of Israel. But I just don't think anywhere that there are injustices like that we should not be concerned. And Days of Rage has had many critics. And there was a Sentinel article about it, and it said, her name is Jo Ellen Trout, I think, Jo Franklin Trout. She is a well-respected PBS reporter, and they feel there was nothing to the fact that she might have been biased. Even if she was biased, and that would be awful, we don't want biased reporting, but even if she were biased, what I gave you was an objective account, which means that there's something there. There's also something to the fact that Israelis have a right to be afraid of their borders and be afraid of, because, as I said to one Palestinian, isn't it a shame that you all did not come to the bargaining table in 48 and in 67? A lot of very reasonable things were offered to them then, and they refused. And so the Israelis are in a position of, how do we trust you now? We couldn't trust you then. And I understand that. I mean, they've got a point there. But someone has to say, enough already. For one thing, Israel cannot remain secure, as long, in my opinion, as long as you breed that kind of feeling that's going on. There are 600,000 people in camps, 600,000 or 650,000 in camps on Gaza and the West Bank. The highest density possibly of living anywhere in this world. And you can't continue that and not expect it to explode. So, I will hand out these things to you all, but does anyone have questions? Comments? You can critique, be critical. I understand.
This area you're talking about, the Middle East, is to a lot of us, I guess, and this may be a very prejudicial view, not known for its high treatment of its women. You said you were relative in Syria. Did you dress in any native form?
No.
You were, just asking. I have friends from Iran who, when they used to go to visit, they
Right.
would.
We were told not to wear anything sleeveless in Syria. Beyond that,
There were just some things that insulted people that you wouldn't want.
beyond that, I really didn't see it. Now, and every time we went into any religious place in Jerusalem, whether it be a mosque, in a mosque you had to take your shoes off, always, and we always had to have our head covered. I know we had to pay for hoods to rent to go in one place. But beyond that, we were just always caught, if we went into any sort of a church, any religious place in Jerusalem, we made sure we had on skirts and not pants, and we tried to have sleeves on. As far as women, I didn't, I went into a disco in Damascus. I mean, they were dressed in incredible outfits.
That's the things we don't.
Yeah, I mean, the hotel was very Western and beautiful. No, I didn't. Now, on the same street that you saw a girl in a mini skirt and, some very Western outfit, you might see a woman. In fact, I didn't bring them, but some pictures of the women with the whole black, even over their face. The paradoxes are just incredible. We were one time in traffic, and I looked over at the car next to me. They had a cellular phone. Not 3 miles away, we had just passed, what are the guys that move with their camels and the, not the nomads, the Bedouins. We had just passed Bedouins in their tent. Every once in a while, by the way, the Bedouin tent, you can see a television antenna out of it. But it was incredible. I mean, it's just incredible to see Bedouins living the way they have always lived and be 3 miles later, 5 miles later, and see somebody's cellular phone in their car.
Apart from the habits of dress, did you notice any difference in treatments among
Of women? Mm-mm. I've been even in South America where women weren't supposed to go into specific bars or something, but I didn't see anything like that. Mm-mm. When we went to the people's home in the village in Syria, I remember an uncle telling me how way back, all the men sat down to eat and then the women, but they didn't do it that way either. They all sat down together. So I think times are a-changing everywhere.
when you said that when you were traveling into Israel and there was all this secrecy and everything saying be quiet, and you thought that maybe they made too big of a deal of it because you didn't really see
Right.
a reason to be afraid. Do you think that's indicative of just how Americans have never been afraid,
Yeah.
they've never felt the need to be afraid, where maybe that's why things happen to Americans in the Middle
That's-
East, because they walk around saying, I'm American, I don't
Yeah,
need to be
that's
afraid,"
right.
and then you never hear from them again.
Yeah, I think that that's definitely a point. One of the things, when we met with the Jerusalem Committee, which are people who are living there, and we were all interchanging ideas of things they could do to get, to reach out to more people, because what they do is get people together for dialogue, and they were giving us some of their feelings about it. And one man finally said, you don't have any idea of what we're talking about, and we don't. You know, we don't. We don't know what it's like to live in that kind of fear. One man said next night he was going to come back, and I said, will we see you tomorrow night? He said, I hope so. I don't know. It's past curfew, you know, which means he could get arrested. But he came, but with great fear because of his past curfew. You can be arrested for up to 6 months without any reason given or ever going to court. One man that was interviewed said he was the president of, I think it was Hebron University, and he was arrested and put, now we're not talking prisons, we're talking tents, open tents on the ground, you know, with maybe blankets on the ground, no running water, because they're housing thousands of people, you know, under administrative rule. They just extended that to 12 months from 6 months. The Knesset did.
I realize a few of you didn't get a copy of everything.
Oh, I'm sorry. Just tell me which ones and I'll, or did you get it? Okay.
No problem. I kept a copy of it.
They told me 40 to 45.